Tears of the Kingdom is out. And I haven't had enough time to make a proper review for it. So, review first impressions. Basically, you're getting a non-formal review from me that just covers what I've seen so far, and probably the only review you'll get on this game from me. But, frankly, this should still cover a lot, as I think I've made pretty good progress without actively rushing the story. Basically, as the text on screen says, please don't spoil the game in the comments. If you want to talk about general gameplay changes, feel free to do that, but I'm trying to go in as blind as possible. I have not watched a single video on this game. The only trailers I had seen going into this game were the ones that were in Nintendo Directs. So, basically, I'm staying as far away from YouTube when it comes to this game as possible, and Twitter and all social medias, really. Anyway, let's talk about Link's toolkit in this game. And, they sure are the toolkit. I'm only talking about the 4 baseline ones, as one of the items is map, another is amiibo, which I genuinely don't like using amiibo in Breath of the Wild. It's probably the same as this game, just because it's basically, here's a bunch of really cool and overpowered free gear. Don't get me wrong, I freaking adore the Feast Deity set though. Probably touch it in post-game, because I like it cosmetically. But, either way, you have those. It's very basic in that degree, that regard. Of course, that's not the only thing we're talking about, so we're going to talk about them. First up, Ultra Hand. It is literally just Magnesis on steroids. Magnesis let you pick up and move around metal objects. Ultra Hand lets you pick up and move around objects. It basically removed the one restriction you had with Ultra Hand, with Magnesis. Also, it decided it also comes with glue. You can glue, like, probably, I think up to like 10 or so, 10, 20 objects together to create things, and it is so cool. It can be a bit finicky to use, especially at first. I think I've gotten the hang of it, but specifically rotating things can be really awkward, and I also find, it might just be my controller, but when you're holding down R to rotate, it kind of just sometimes stops picking up your input. Either way, the next thing of note is Uplift, or Ascend, I think, something like that. You go upwards through walls. It's the replacement for Cryonis, and, yeah, I prefer Cryonis. It has some cool uses and puzzles, but it's also really hard to tell when the game wants you to use it to solve a puzzle, because it's just a ceiling. And then, additionally, Cryonis was just funner. Basically, I don't dislike it, but it just kind of feels like a weaker Cryonis in a lot of regards, which really sucks. And the last of the 3 that I would actually count, because one of them is more so attacking than utility, so I'm counting it separately for the sake of the video, but is Recall, and I did not care for Stasis in Breath of the Wild. It is so boring and has some fun uses occasionally, but 9 times out of 10, I'd rather just not use it. In fact, I think most times you're expected to use it, I just didn't, because it was funner without using it. But Recall just lets you rewind objects, which is basically used to reverse the path of trails and gears. And basically just reverse if there's a platform that only goes down, Recall, make it go up. It's really fun, because you're just, it's basically just get to do things in a fun way. Also gives the whole screen a grayscale effect while in use, which could probably make for some really cool thumbnails. Anyway, time for combat. Or more specifically, fuse. You can fuse weapons together. You can fuse items with weapons. I think there are less weapons in the game, period, because some of them have been switched from a normal weapon to a fusion weapon, which I'm fine with. Because it also basically adds more durability to weapons, because you also have things like, I have found ones that are like 20-something damage plus, but break in a few hits. You can also do this with bow and arrows. So I currently have a bow setup that deals 60 damage a shot. Yeah. It's fun. Combat's relatively the same. Aside from the fact there's a crap ton of new enemies. Like, seriously, thank God there were like 3 enemies in Breath of the Wild. The fact is, within the first couple hours, I'd encountered more enemies than were in the base Breath of the Wild before I encountered all the enemy types that were in Breath of the Wild. Like, for variation, one of my biggest gripes with Breath of the Wild was the lack of enemy variety. Now, onto the world. One of my biggest worries going into the game was, oh god, how much of Breath of the Wild is it going to reuse? And, the answer is all of it. Also, while editing this, I'm realizing you can freaking grind on railing like this is a Sonic game. Good to know! And the answer to that is it uses the entire base world from Breath of the Wild. But it adds things, like there's now caves and stuff, which is cool. But essentially, you have Breath of the Wild, the world. And then they kind of just also casually went, oh yeah, by the way, you can also go above and underground. So, essentially, there are 3 maps in this game, one of which is reused. But that also kind of worked for the game's advantage, as relatively early on in the game, I'm like, okay, I can probably go here to get equipment from this thing, because it should still be there, and it's really good equipment, especially for this point in the game. In fact, it's really good equipment in the end game of Breath of the Wild. So I go there, and that was not what I was expecting, and it really surprised me. So it also uses the existing world to its advantage. I'm also going to throw the dungeons in here, because I don't really have a better place to put them. I can't talk about all of them, because I have not done all of them. But oh my god, they are so much better than Breath of the Wild. I found most of the Divine Beast puzzles annoying or boring. A lot of them had a lot of waiting, which was really annoying. And also, every one of those dungeons felt the same, with the exception of the first Divine Beast you do, because that is the only one that looks distinct. It does not matter which one you do first, it is just the first one you did in your first playthrough of Breath of the Wild, and Hyrule Castle. I have done 2. They both have more interesting designs, more interesting visuals, concepts, puzzles, than anything in Breath of the Wild. In fact, I honestly think these 2 dungeons alone are better than all 5 dungeons in Breath of the Wild. Because those were the worst part of that game that was actually in the game. Again, my biggest complaint with the game was lack of enemies. That wasn't an issue with this. My biggest complaint of the game that was in the game, because it wasn't in the game. So, yeah. Generally, the side quests feel about the same as Breath of the Wild. Korok puzzles are about the same. There's some new variety in them. There's still probably way too many, and the gift is probably still a literal piece of crap. But, honestly, at its core, this is just more Breath of the Wild with a ton of new shrines and a ton of new areas to explore. Is it the best open world game ever? Probably not. Is it better than Breath of the Wild? In some areas, yes, but I frickin' missed the bombs. So, honestly, it's just a really good game, and it will probably win Game of the Year, or at least get nominated, or get, like, 2nd place. It's gonna beat every game I'm gonna put above it this year, for sure. Mostly because those are Pikmin and an indie game that's a sequel to a game like 1,000 people have played. But, either way, at its core, it's just more Breath of the Wild, which was already a fantastic game, and also won Game of the Year. So, it basically is the issue of, it's hard to talk about, because at its core, it is more of the same. I've heard a lot of people complaining about the fact it's $10 more expensive, which, yeah, still makes more sense than PlayStation's first $90 game, or $70 if you're in the States. It's not groundbreaking, and it's not mind-blowing, because those things were already done by its predecessor, but again, it's more Breath of the Wild. If you enjoyed Breath of the Wild and really liked it like I did, you're going to enjoy this, because it is just more of an already great game. And frankly, that's all it needed to be for me. If you enjoyed, please be sure to like and subscribe, since it genuinely helps the channel out a ton. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!